Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Ron Merritt. I'll be your chairperson this afternoon. Introducing the panel members, Lynn Nesbitt to my left, and to her left is Brent McIntyre, and representing the city from the assessment department is Michael Taylor. Our recording secretary, Michelle Nippon. We'll be hearing an application for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested has been described in each application, and will limit discussions to those matters. The statements that the applicant or the assessor make at the hearing are sworn testimony, and anybody speaking in these matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by City Council and is independent along with the city administration. We make our decisions based on the evidence provided for the hearing and issue a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decision in respect to application may be appealed to the municipal board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to application for exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included in the board's order. In respect to the hearing this afternoon, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant. Following the swearing in, we'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the other applicant may have, and then it will be the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each party will have the opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all evidence about the application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket this afternoon. The session will close after all applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live stream recorded and will be part of the public record. I'll ask your secretary to swear in Mr. Taylor and Mr. Story, or affirm.
Would you swear? Can you state your full name, please?
Mike Taylor.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God? Thank you. Can you state your full name, please?
Sid Story.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll just go according to the docket. So the first one on the docket is 1750 Keniston Boulevard. Mr. Taylor, you can take us through this property.
Should we reveal the file numbers today?
Pardon me?
File number and roll number?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1715 Keniston Boulevard, the file number is 19-4172, and the roll number is 0309145000. Proposed 2020 assessed value being $49,026,000. Very large property here, classified as a neighborhood shopping center today. 9 different buildings on site, mixture of big box retail, some restaurants. 16 different rental units there, being built in the range of 2001. Recent developments in 2018 saw that Mr. Mike's Steakhouse being developed there along McGillivray Boulevard. Wall heights ranging from 13 feet to 20 feet as typical. Gross floor area being 155,225. What we have today is 154,540. Page 2 of my brief just shows the subject property leases as reported, along with the fact that the owner complied with requests for information for 2016 and 2017. The next page, we have some rental comparables in and along the Keniston, Sturfield neighboring kind of area. There, it all just support a market rents applied by the department for the model. For various different uses here, for the restaurants, different retail use. Flipping over to page 5. We have the market rent, market valuation here. For the subject property. Basically most of it's main floor space. The only one we can touch on as being second floor space being that premise ID 31762. It is 7 down from the top, 491 square feet. At a model rent of $14.55 a square foot is the mezzanine for the Mongo's restaurant. There's like an office mezzanine there. The remainder of the units, as we see there, are on the ground floor. So as I said before, we're classifying and valuing this property as a neighborhood shopping center, so therefore it gets parameters as set out by that property type. So a vacancy percentage of 4%. Shortfall being $8 a square foot. Expense allowance of 2% and a capitalization rate at 6.45% to get to that 49 million and 26,000 value we saw on the page 1. Page 6, you've seen a million times, is the capitalization rate table. So as I said earlier, this property got a capitalization rate of 6.45%. So we're looking at that table that falls outside of the 28th percentile, suggesting this is an above average neighborhood shopping center, which when we're looking at it going ahead, I would suggest that it is. Give you guys a second to catch up here. Sure, you're good. So my page 8 and page 9 will show just some aerial photographs of the subject property just there located on Kinnison Boulevard. So you can note that the shape of the parcel is irregular. That's by the owner's choice mostly, but I'll get into that also. The recently developed Mr. Mike's Steakhouse, as I talked about earlier, is just up here on this part of the parcel. Where you see the little icon with the one finger up is like a pad site where there's actually development going on right now to put up a building that's gonna straddle that and the Lowe's roll number that's on a separate roll number. Which this is all gonna get dealt with at a different time, but just so that everyone on the panel is aware. The income expense questionnaire for the subject property does include information on the Lowe's property in addition to the strip mall at the back, but the owner has requested that they be on separate roll numbers. The Red River Co-op that you know that's on Kenniston, the McDonald's that's there, the Steinbeck Credit Union, and the Canadian Tire all have their separate roll numbers and aren't included today when we're talking about this property. So page 9 just shows more of the subject property with that island of restaurants, the Mongo's, the Brew House, some of those sites there, and some of the smaller CRUs. As the bottom of the page has the brick and the larger format retail, the Brick Marshalls Sport Check that we're talking about today. After that, I've included the submission for 2017 for income expense for the subject property. As I said before, it's including other neighboring properties, so it's hard to kind of analyze which expenses are applicable here and break them out into individual CRUs, especially for such a larger property. I would ask the board to turn to page, we've got a weird page number, page 29, I believe. My brief is labeled as page 1 for some reason. It's just before the appendices, so essentially it's a table that I just generated when I was preparing the brief here today. I've done that for other properties in this docket where there's a lot of stuff going on, just to bring the board's attention to everything. What we have here is just showing the tenancies, their square footages, the rent. The column that says final annual rent is basically the modeled rent that was applied with the potential gross rent of the $3,413,720. If you're following me at the very bottom, that's the modeled rent. The model rent per square foot is beside that for each of the units. On the flip side of that is the reported rent per square foot and the reported annual rent. In some cases, it doesn't actually, what they're reporting as per square foot doesn't match up, so I'm not sure if there's special clauses in the lease, but this is again just for the board's information here. Just show that we're applying rents that are in and around market for the subject property, being just around $200,000 lower, but keeping in mind, you know, they're not reporting a rent for the mezzanine for the Mongo space and some of the other rents like the older leases. After this page here, page 29, which supports that market valuation, we have just the general addenda information, which I'm sure you guys have seen a million times, supporting the city's capitalization rate supply and the expense rate of 2%. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Story, questions?
Yes, before we proceed, on your page number.
The 29, number 1 there?
Yeah, on the last document we just talked about,
Yeah,
this red roll,
yeah.
what does ODC mean?
It's our internal online data collection. That's what the city calls it. That's where the mailers go to.
I made 5 phone calls last night to find out what it meant. So you've indicated that, firstly, the property has frontage and some exposure off of McGillivray and Keniston,
Yep.
and it's been built, kind of a work in process since 2001,
Yep.
they started. And the very first tenant, you may or may not be aware of, was Alternative Brannigan's, which is the restaurant with the retention pond.
Yeah, we had this property last cycle, so we've gone over all the
Yes.
history of the property.
And just for clarification, let's go through just your same page again.
No, 29?
Yeah. So the final annual rent, that's off of the mailing?
That's what was reported as their total annual rent.
So that's the owners.
Yeah, so essentially what they've reported for annual rents for each tenancy, I've plugged them in, and that's what they add up to.
Yeah.
Because again, the mailer includes a bunch of other properties that aren't on this roll number.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see on there, some of them are lower than actually received, some are higher, just suggesting that, you know,
So which is,
generally what's
the
here.
ODC is your model rent, correct?
The ODC is not, that's what the owner is reporting to
Well, that's
the
the only,
department.
where's the model rent here?
To the left of that, where it says final rent per square foot. Those numbers should match what's on my page 5 in the
Okay.
income valuation of subject
But
property.
that's on the square footage basis, okay.
That's per square foot, and then beside that's the annual amount.
Okay.
It's just for comparative purposes for the board showing that it's market rates.
So this is model driven.
Correct.
Thank you. Those are all my questions.
I thank you. This bit,
Okay, so just so I'm
Mhm.
clear, yet again,
Yep.
on that page 29, also one, final annual rent, that's model, that's reflected here in your page 5.
Yeah, so the
Your
bottom, the right
ODC,
of that, yeah,
yeah.
the 3413,720
Right,
is the same potential rent you see here at the bottom.
great. And the ODC is the actual rent
That's-
reported. There's
Yeah.
only $150,000 difference in.
Yeah, and I
in,
said like that, there's some older leases in there, and the Mongo's mezzanine spaces and
Okay.
included as well.
And have you inspected this property recently?
Recently? Yeah, I've gone through lots of the spaces, including the Mr. Mike's Steakhouse, yeah, fully inspected this property.
Okay. And the cap rate, you said that reflects above average shopping center. And
Yep.
that's in terms of above average how? How is it above average?
It would be above average compared to other properties we've classified as neighborhood shopping centers.
Okay.
So generally, the above average ones that we've seen throughout this process and throughout reassessment, it would be at better properties like the subject where you have low vacancy, good tenants involved, newer developments included. Other good examples would be, Kildonan Green, where they have the newer Sobeys, kind of a neighborhood shopping center where you have your standard. You have like a bank tenancy or two, you have a gas station, it's like your one-stop kind of shopping place.
Okay, there's that mix.
There's fast
and there's-
food, there's pad site restaurants, there's big box retail.
Do they typically need an anchor of some kind, like a?
Yeah,
or
typically
is it
those
just-
are the ones you'll see with anchors actually involved, whereas you see like more common ones that we've classified, and you'll look at them later today. There might just be like one building that's multi-tenanted, but not anything this size that's driving this much rent or income.
In terms of a neighborhood shopping center, is this on the large side or a
Yeah, like this
larger
would be in the
one?
larger one, yeah,
Okay.
compared to lots of the other ones, yes, for
Okay.
sure. I mean, a good example is just, again, if you're looking at our hearing today, as an example, you'll see some examples of larger neighborhood shopping centers, and you'll see some other ones where you're like, this is one building, 8 tenancies.
Does location, like this
Yeah.
is sort of on to McGilvery and Keniston, so
Yes.
busy.
Busy
there's
intersection.
Access
Yeah,
and,
and you get lots of development from Bridgewater, again, Bridgewater, the Northtown Road developments, those would also be classified as a better than average neighborhood shopping center with the Save on Foods and all your development there.
okay,
Sage Creek, stuff like that, that has like a new development around it, and development on the site as well,
okay.
yeah.
And there's more development that can take place on this site as well? did you say?
As I was saying, yeah, on that one page, page
Looking at
8, I believe it was.
Yeah, with the finger thing.
Yeah, when they're doing that, there's permits in place, and I brought the permits somewhere, just for my own information. Here, just, yeah, they had some permits and site plans, their building marks work warehouse. On that site that straddles both road numbers, there's also gonna be a, I can't remember what it's called, Vita Health food
Okay.
market going in there, and another building as well, as those two, so going on that same site, so.
Okay.
And just recently, we saw that Mr. Mike's go on, and not too long before that, we saw some other development on the site, so.
Okay, thank you.
I thank you. Mr. McIntyre?
I have no questions.
I just have one, Mr. Taylor.
Sure.
This is all model generated. Any overrides here at all? No, it's
No.
just what it spills out?
Yeah, and what it spills out, and it was reviewed, I had it last time, and I looked at it ahead of time here, what it was spitting out. I mean, it is suggesting some numbers here that are rounded pretty close to the actuals, so those ones could be overrides for those, but the rest of it would be modeled.
Okay, I thank you. Mr. Story, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Just grab a sip of water. Just ask you to refer to the brief, our brief, and there's a photograph on the front cover. You'll see that our statement of issues, if we have a statement of issues, are for this particular property, for this hearing, are purely cap rate. Just to talk cap rate. We're accepting the city's position on the market rent. These are all relatively current rents because major developments have happened in the last 4 or 5 years. So we've accepted the city's rents, they're within reason. We have asked for slightly higher vacancy. I'm sorry, I thought we were for 5% vacancy. So we have 2 statements of issues. Slight increase in vacancy, 5% to reflect what's happened in the site over the years. And also a 2209 accepting the city. And the 6.45 we think is unrealistic, given a few things. Number one is this shopping center is subject to the ills of retail across North America, with people buying online and the end of big box. The shopping center also suffered a bit in relative terms because it hasn't had an anchor until after the last cycle. The anchor now is a shadow anchor. It's not on the same property, but it's adjacent, and that's Lowe's. However, having just opened Lowe's, 2 months later, Lowe's announced that they were closing a number of stores across Canada. They also own Rona. Now, thankfully for this site, they have no intention of closing this store. They're going to keep this store open. They, in all probability, will get rid of the Rona, which is in Linden Common. So we don't have a typical anchor store. We have had a history, an incredible history of vacancy in this property. I'm just going to give you a little walk down memory lane. Many of you will remember this, I think. When this was conceived initially, it was Mr. Nozick conceived the land assembly to do this. The first tenant to sign was Outback Steakhouse. And Outback Steakhouse designed what is now the Canadian Brew House, and if you recall, it's got a very large, very attractive retention pond. You sit on a patio, you're looking at water, it's quite nice. At the last moment, they backed out. They were concerned about the proximity, or pardon me, the lack of exposure from Kenaston because it's set back quite far. Outback didn't proceed, but Brannigan's did, and Brannigan's had a business failure. When they failed, Well Hospitality came in with Pasta La Vista. They didn't make it, they closed. They rebranded, renovated, and reopened as DeQuisto's Italian Eatery. And Mike DeQuisto was their chef. It didn't make it. They then was not rebranded and significantly renovated to be Los Chicos. They didn't make it, so they closed. And Canadian Brew House is there now. So we've had, in this 10-year period, we've had 6 different restaurant operations on this site. That doesn't tell me that this is one of the higher performing sites in the city. In addition to that, back further in the market with less exposure were 3 locations that just closed in the last year or year and a half. One was the Aurora Mediterranean Market, the other was Muha Burgers, and the third was part of Aurora. It was called Indulge Bistro. So we've had, and now we're only talking restaurants, and restaurants make up 29,000 square feet of this total site. Up until this cycle, the city had 2 different revenue streams, one for restaurants, one for retail. I brought the decisions, I'll pass them out if I'm allowed. But last year, the retail portion of the cap rate was 7%, last cycle, the cap rate was 7%, and 8% on the restaurants to reflect the risk of restaurants. Restaurants are higher risk. These are not nationals. The folks I mentioned earlier, I think are all local. There's no national chains in there. There are, but on different roles. McDonald's is there, for example. So we've had that history. We've had the history of vacancy. Again, we've had a property that the tenants were anxious to see further development. We were looking for that anchor tenant. We're happy to get it. And now, as Mike has indicated, there's a Mark's Warehouse going in as well, and they'll be between the co-op store and the Lowe's, and straddling this roll number, and 1765, the next property. So we've had that situation. So we've had a history of the city used to actually recognize the different cap rates. They ended up last year on these, or last cycle on these properties with a 7.5% cap rate. Based on what's happening with retail, based on the fact that the tenant they've waited so long to get, announced shortly after they opened that there was uncertainty as to their longevity in the marketplace. It doesn't look like it's a problem for this property, but it could be. Little history, that site that Lowe's took eventually was bought by Sam's Town, the wholesalers, many years ago, and decided it wouldn't work for them. So there are some real challenges in exposure on this particular site. The city has provided evidence in their brief of their market rate study, capitalization rate study. They've also recently provided us with all of the boards as well, with cap rate studies that reflect some of the actual sales to prove that their system is plausible, is realistic. And I'm sure you've all seen that, but the last addition to it was 1271 Jefferson, which is a neighborhood shopping center with an IGA store and a bank, and et cetera, and that was capped at 7.4%. But the main thing is it's inconceivable in the development industry to suggest that cap rates have compressed in retail. It's just illogical. Thousands and thousands of stores are closing. Amazon is getting bigger. The risks are mounting. and there's no basis for a cap rate adjustment, compression. So I'm asking the board to consider going to my page 3, the 5% versus 4 for vacancy, just on some of the vacancy I've shared with you. We have another Snap Fitness, just went bankrupt in the site, but that's post-reference, but recently, in the last few weeks. So I would ask that the board consider the 5 versus 4% as a parameter, and that's backed up by the incredible difficulty with restaurants thriving in that center. And the 7.5 cap rate, which is consistent with what was applied last year or 2 years ago, and the market has not improved for retail in 2 years. As a matter of fact, the development community is very concerned about whether we're going to have a lot of vacant property as our lifestyles change and we buy more online and these things we do. So I respectfully submit that the board consider 7.5 as a cap rate, with the 5% adjustment being a 1% increase over parameters for the vacancy, an assessment of $39,554,248. And there's a bit of information in the rent roll is in. If you don't mind, I'm just going to go through this quickly, and I won't do this with the other factors. First on page 6 of our brief, you'll see the irregular shape, which also speaks to cap rate. This is not a normally shaped property. Some of the front, the reason it's chopped up like this is Canadian Tire wanted the frontage on McGilvery. Our friends at Steinbach Credit Union wanted both McGilvery and Kenniston. So that meant that what was left for the other retailers was part of the interior without the exposure. Mr. Mikes came along and he built right on, or wanted to be a tenant on, right on McGilvery Boulevard. So you see the irregular shape, that speaks to cap rate. We talked about 9 years in development. It's taken a long time to ramp up. It's still not there. It's probably half or 3/4 developed by now, maybe more, but not very much. I'll just ask you quickly, board, to go to the rent roll, starting on, go to page 9. And just wanted to point this out to you. That's a Canadian Brew House, 6,500 square foot. That's a restaurant. The next one is Asana Sushi. It's a restaurant. If you flip to page 11, that's a Mongol Grill, another restaurant. If you go to page 12, Mr. Mike's, another restaurant. If you go to go to page 14, that's Shapes, no, not Shapes, Snap Fitness, I'm sorry, Snap Fitness. If you go to page 16, you'll see Pizza Hotline, kind of a restaurant with pickup and delivery, more than that.
That's not on this roll number, so.
No, but I'm just going to do the whole rent roll. Okay. Phoenix Square, again, this splits into two. So I'm just showing you there's, in the total site of the two properties, two rent rolls, or two assessment rolls, there are 29,000 square feet of restaurants, and that speaks to risk as well. So I'd like the board to consider the risk and slight vacancy adjustment. Thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Taylor, questions of Mr. Thornton?
Just two. Yes or no, the vacancy as of the reference date was 0%? Which corresponds with my page 29, suggesting there was no vacancy as of the reference date.
I believe it's low. Yeah, no vacancy, correct.
And
Because
then,
they build as tenants are there, so you'll see that.
and then your page 27, so we talked about it a bit in your presentation there. You're talking about how, well, two of us did this for 2018. You got the order included in your evidence for whatever reason, but you haven't included the order, the board's decision. I mean, it's hearing de novo, but
I'm sorry, what did you say with this question now?
I'm just curious as to why you didn't include the board's decision, what they reduced the rent, or sorry, reduced the value by for
It's on
2018.
page 27.
It's
But
not,
again,
it's on the next page, but it wasn't included.
Are you talking about this page 2 of the, page 2 of the decision?
Page 27, which would be page 2 of the order.
Yeah, you're looking for, yeah, I just went and printed.
So you mentioned some cap rates and what we did last time and stuff, and I just wanted to be clear.
Well, I've got them here. Just one moment. We just passed out the
Yeah, if you want, you can just read the board's order.
1765 and 7 and, I can pass it over.
But you're suggesting today that the value should decrease from last cycle, even with new development on site?
Yes,
Okay, those are my questions.
based on market conditions and risk, cap rate, it's all risk.
I thank you, Ms. Lisbeth.
I have no questions.
Mr. McIntyre.
I have no questions.
Just, well, one, Mr. Story, on your page 3, I guess you had, you stated to the left bottom page, okay?
Yes.
The board's decision in regards to retail and.
That's 218, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so is this why you use the 7.5% cap rate, because it's sort of in between and?
Well, what we're finding in our analysis, in our cap rate studies, is that a property like this, if it had an anchor tenant and didn't have some of these individual site-specific challenges, would probably be 7.3%, which seems to be pretty consistent with the way the boards have handled it. But I wanted to show you that in the previous cycle, and I asked Mr. Taylor if he knew why that happened, there were 2 different revenue streams because there were 2 different risk factors caused by the restaurants. So that's how it was done with, I've got the decisions here. And that's part of the reason we used this 87.5. But
So-
we're looking at, for all of our retail, 7.5 we think is reasonable, because this may be a catastrophic Christmas season for retailers. It may not, but it's a difficult time for them.
So the difference between the city and your evaluation is $10 million?
Yeah, based on cap.
Okay. I thank you.
And there's a slight, Mr. Mayor, there's a slight adjustment to the vacancy, maybe 5%.
Summation, either party?
Thank you.
Mr. Story?
Okay.
Okay. We'll go on to the next property, which is 1399 New Phillip Street. Mr. Taylor, the floor is yours.
Mr. McIntyre.
I absolutely have to get another pen, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, do you have?
Yes.
You're okay?
Yeah.
Check the next one from the front if you want that one.
Oh, no, this should be
Just gonna need 1 second.
Yep.
Organize my files. Okay.
Mr. Taylor?
Ready to go? Okay, so for 1399 McPhillips Street, the file number is 19-4631, and the roll number is 1104-0682-000. The proposed 2020 reassessment value is $40 million, 112. We have some mixed information at the bottom here, so we've had lots of redevelopment on this site, really. So the plan area and gross floor area, what I'm gonna suggest to you today is that those haven't been properly removed from the city's database. As we've seen, I'll get through it in my presentation. But really what we're looking at today, even the leasable area that you're seeing on my page 1 is incorrect, and I'll get to that later. But leasable area I'm using today is 192,467 square feet.
Sorry, please say that.
190?
192,467 is the total leasable area, is what I'm suggesting. And we'll get to my recommendation later on in my presentation here. Page 2 just shows that the owner sent in income and expense questionnaires for 2016 and 2017. Also has the subject property lease is listed below. And then I've also included some rental comparables for market rents, on McPhillips, Leila, in the surrounding area, again, retail properties like the subject. Page 4 and 5 have that initial workup that will show you the 40,112,000. I would suggest flipping past those for right now to page 6 and 7.
Well, I'm
Those
sorry,
will
what did you
just-
say? What did you say before you said 6 and 7?
Yeah, I'm looking, my valuation today is based on pages 6 and 7. So I'm saying 4 and 5 really just will tell you how the $40 million value is calculated. And if everyone can just turn to pages 6 and 7.
Okay, hang on, okay.
Okay. That's the square footage that's there.
Yeah, the 192,467.
So
on page
you're
6.
at 38,551.
Yeah, that's my
Okay.
recommendation today.
Okay.
I don't know, Sid, if you're good with my recommendation number, if I should keep going.
Yeah, keep going, please. I do appreciate the offer.
Okay.
This is a very complicated property.
Yeah.
Okay.
So much like the last property we looked at, I would suggest, so we've got kind of the standard parameters there again for neighborhood shopping center that we've seen before, on pages 6 and 7. I'm gonna flip you to page 10. Well, essentially we saw some extensive demolition and demoling of this property. So it was more like what we would have seen in the past as a community shopping center, which I've presented at hearings past, suggesting properties like this, and there's some other ones in the city where they've taken out that central corridor, made it more into a neighborhood shopping center rather than a community shopping center. For the most part, that's a trend that we've seen going across the country where they're taking out that, to eliminate, reduce CAM costs and expenses to the owner. 3,500 Corden, no, 3,500 Grant. If you guys are familiar with that one, we had Moray and Grant there, where there's a McDonald's, a Safeway. It used to have a
Park
central,
West or
yeah,
something
it used to
like
have a
that.
corridor that went through the mill. They've taken that out, it's just longer bays for the units instead.
Where is that on, Grant?
On Grant, yeah, I'm just
Grant and what?
talking about how the landscape's
Yeah,
changed.
Grant and where?
Like right Grant and Moray there, and they put
Oh, yeah.
up Boston Pizza and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So here on the subject side, if we're on page 10, suggest that they've demolished, the central corridor is kind of where you'd see most of this red dot on page 10. So they made some more room for like more unit front parking in front there for the Royal Bank, Tennessee, and all the ones that are kind of located in that strip there. And they demolished a section of the back to allowing better parking and access for the gym tenancy and some of the tenancies at the rear of the subject property. They've also added on 3 new pad sites to the subject. Being this one here, the first one that fronts McPhillips has 7 tenancies in there. Pizza Hut Express, there's an MPI agent, and then some other restaurants. As well as the Jollibee that's located here and a Booster Juice and some other restaurants on the other pad sites. Again, like the last property we looked at, Sid and I did this one together last time when they were undergoing the mill rate process. Now I'd say it's more or less complete. But anyways, similarly to the last property on page 19, we have that handy Excel spreadsheet. So showing that the areas reported, I kind of cross-referenced this with leasing brochures that were post-reference on the website for the subject. Took out a map, went around the subject property, into each unit to verify the spaces and stuff like that to make sure what we had and what I presented today, because things just weren't adding up when I first was generating the brief. So that's why I'm presenting that 192,467 as being correct. And that does include the little RBC drive-through kiosk. It's like a little ATM drive-through thing they have outside in the middle of the parking lot. I've highlighted the units in blue that they did not report rent on. But would suggest that the 192 is correct. Also looking, you can compare like last time, the model rent versus the market rent applied, or sorry, model rent applied versus the mailer rent received. I labeled this one mailer rent instead of ODC for some reason.
It actually makes more sense.
Yeah.
mailer rent.
Yeah.
That's good.
Mailer rent instead of ODC rent. I think last time was just to make the spreadsheet a little bit narrower. I would turn the board's attention to the Cineplex unit on site here. Essentially, it's a very old lease that we have here. I think the renewal was done in 1998, but I've dealt with this property again with Sid and for business assessment with Cineplex, and would suggest that the 939 is similar to what we've been using in the past for assessment for that. But obviously, it's a big jump when you're looking at what the annual rent when we're using 939 at 246 versus $3.05 gets them the $79,000. So a large discrepancy there, along with the other vacancies in here, which would suggest that what we're using for model rent is close to what is market rent. I've included the income expense statements though too, that corroborate that table. Just kind of simplifies it when I put that in there when there's this much stuff going on. And then after that page, I just again have the addenda package that you guys again have seen over again, but you guys can ask me questions on that if you want. But yeah, that's my recommendation today, is to go to that $38,551,000. Thank you. And that is recognizing a higher vacancy as well. I'd just like to put that in there. I'm allowing for a 7% vacancy, whereas originally it was at 4%.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Mr. Story?
And I appreciate the offer in the 7% vacancy. The vacancy last cycle was 79%, and for the previous 10 years, it's been over 70%. 140,000 square feet have not been occupied or used as a store since 2010. So I appreciate the offer, but I don't think the rent, or pardon me, the vacancy being allowed is reasonable in the circumstance. But let me ask you, what other components make up your recommendation? You're adjusting vacancy,
Well,
anything
I
else?
adjusted the square footage. I looked at everything on site. I'm adjusting the vacancy based on what was there as the reference date when I looked at all the mailer information and what I saw on site. Because before we had some units where it was, we had the dental center and two different premises before. Now I've combined them into one because it is only one unit. Instead of having two, or you might have a higher rent per square foot, now they're in one where you get economies of scale would have a lower rent per square foot. And then other units that were missed previously in the valuation, I've added those ones in as well.
And you did mention to the board that the blue are not collecting rent, that's because they're vacant.
Yeah, that's why I'm
Right?
giving a
Yeah,
7%
They're
vacancy.
vacancy, okay. And I guess the fly in the room
Yep.
is the market lease rent for 65,000 square feet Save On Foods.
Mhm.
And that particular space had been leased prior to Save On, to Zellers. And Zellers were paying $6 for the main store, 120,000 feet, and $4 for the back end. They realized that they were supposed to be a Target, they held out hoping Target would come in. There's a question at the end of this, sorry. The Target would come in, but Target chose not to. So the only other opportunity was to redevelop the mall in accordance with the tenant, which is Save On. They would come if they made it like a freestanding store. So to acquire that tenant, I know we've talked about it many
Yeah.
times, they cut them a check for $8 million. And they took the rent that,
I'm sorry,
Mark-
are you like doing evidence on the save on?
no, I'm asking, were you aware that they made that large inducement?
No, they didn't report any large inducement.
Okay. In addition to that, one of the conditions of the lease, are you aware, was that they provide I've forgotten the name, Good Life Fitness on site, because they go hand in hand with Big Food. So this is a
What is it,
secondary
Fit for Life?
division of it as part of it, it's called Fit for Life.
Yeah.
So they had to built a fitness in the back of the shopping center. You can't see it from McPhillips or from any frontage. It's in the back, is that correct?
That one's in the back where they demolished part of the building to get the
Yeah.
Good Life in there, yeah.
Yeah, well, they demolished portion of the building because the lease required they have loading, or loading. And then that left another area that they could build to accommodate the lease requirement. And that, they pay rent on that at $9.50 a square foot. What do you treat that as a model rent?
Sorry.
And it's fit for less, so you've got it at 12, if they're paying $9.50, you've got it at 12.11.
Yep.
Okay, so it was specifically built for this tenant, it's a brand new lease.
Yep.
Why would the model generate a higher number? It's Northgate. Northgate was a second-run neighborhood shopping center until this regeneration. Why would the model kick that up?
Why would the model kick out and why would I support that?
Well, it's brand new. The
Yeah, I'm
brand new is
suggesting with the
$9.50.
market rents, again, like we talked about the same for the cinema, why am I not using $3 is that I believe market rent is higher than what's reported.
Well, that's another, you bring up another point. The cinema, you know it's a second-run cinema? Are you aware of that?
What do you mean by second?
Second run, it's not first run, it's a.
That's the
stuff that's
second
being-
tendency,
You see
yeah.
at home, you can watch it at home, or you can watch it at second. There were two, there's only one left, and that's in Northgate. And this is Cineplex, and they deal, I think you've met the Cineplex people, they deal at arm's length with their landlords, and that's what they pay in rent. They just closed the cinema at Garden City not long
I would
ago.
suggest that, yeah, I do deal with the other cinemas and Cineplex and their representative. And the actual rents received, we generally don't use on most of them because they're not reflective of market rent.
But this has been the rent in the cinema. You haven't adjusted the $14 face rent on Save-On, irrespective of whether or not they did or didn't have a landlord inducement. You didn't adjust it,
Nope.
but you adjusted the others upwardly. And I'm saying that being the fitness place and the fitness and the cinema. Okay, next question. I think those are my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt?
So in this one, there's a cap of 7.3.
Yep,
The previous property was 6.45.
yep,
Can you explain the different cap?
different cap for sure. While this one is, it still has the structures, lots of the structures are still there from going back into 1962. Whereas the other ones didn't have that in Linden Ridge at all. I would suggest it's my opinion that the Linden Ridge Shopping Center, if we're comparing the two properties, would be a better location than Northgate, to be honest,
Okay.
on McPhillips. This one would fall as not better than average, but in the higher, like the 20% off. So if you're looking at that table on my page 8,
Mhm.
sorry, we're following the 80th percentile. So,
Okay. So it's basically location, older.
I would suggest it's
that's what I'm
older.
hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the structures are older.
yeah,
Okay. Well, okay, the vacancy you suggested was increased to 7%, and that reflected the vacancy as at the reference.
yeah, that's all me when I'm reviewing it, going on site, and looking at the rent rolls, suggesting 7%, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre?
No, Lynn took my question, so
Sorry.
thank you.
You go first next time.
I think this has happened more than once.
I have none. Mr. Story, the floor is yours.
Thank you. We'll just refer you again to our brief, and page 2, it's assessed neighborhood shopping center, assessed at $40,112,000. It is coming to the end of a regeneration. It seems to be working. Save-On has been a very positive tenant to add to this site. The owners have spent between the inducements and refurbishing to their satisfaction in excess of $20 million, it was reported. and some newspaper articles that are attached. If we go to page 3, we'll cut to the quick. The assessor's using a model rent of $16.67. We're using a rate of $10.70, and there's a reason for that. If we go to page 8 of our brief, you'll see the square footage. That's the total tenant mix that we talked about. Mike was correct that we have the cinema. We have that has a different. The lease rate on the cinema is $3.05. The city is using. We just had a sup on this, so we call it the 219 model, but it's the same information. And the big one is going down to Save On Foods. Now, Save On Foods received, as I indicated, was well publicized, an $8 million annual reducement to make what had been a Zellers, 140,000 square foot Zellers, and then vacant for a number of years. It was held for 3 years to be a Target distribution center, and they didn't go ahead. It sat vacant for 3 years. So in total, it was over 10 years since it did any business. That's the real vacancy. So these are we're just going to go down that landlord inducement. Now, I know we typically don't deal with landlord inducements, but I believe this is a different circumstance. Because Save On Foods in 60,000 square feet don't pay $14 a square foot. As a matter of fact, I'll show you evidence of other people in Winnipeg, food stores that are paying considerably less than that. They did it because there's that significant renovation to the property and the significant landlord inducement to enable them to develop their store interior. And they've done that because it's an international market. They've got lots of food and whatnot. So we look at that, and our position is that the real rent to owner is $6.79. It's not $14. The face contract is $14. That provides the lease rate. It picks up the free rent period through development, which is almost a year, and also is a recovery to the landlord of that amount. So in the real world, the rent to landlord, and this isn't an effective rent, this is just rent to landlord, because to get that tenant, you have to do this massive renovation, is $6.79. The other one, if we go down, there's your fitness club we talked about. Imagine signing a lease that required you build a fitness club in close proximity, but not connected. It was Save On who didn't want an interior mall and didn't want any access into an interior mall from their site. So they gave rise to the demalling of the site, which is taking off the whole front of the building. On the on Fitness for Life, the landlord also provided a landlord inducement of $379,000, all to generate $950 in rent. And you've acknowledged that that's the face rent, and that's what it is. There's no visibility. It's behind the store by the loading docks. You can't see it from McPhillips. It's nice, it's a little building. The actual rent to owner is $6.50. You don't even get $9.50 because you pay $379, $8.90 in inducements. We drop down, and I won't go through all these because we just ignore them, but we do have Dollarama is significant. Some of them, Pizza Hut, had to be relocated to a pad site because they were right in the front of the mall, and that was a place that was immediately destined for demolition and was demolished. And then Dollarama, if you look, it's 4 from the bottom. Dollarama had $267,380 to be able to get them to enter into a lease at $15 a square foot. And the net to owner, these are not net effective rents, but they're just the amount that the owner gets from these tenants after making these inducements, is $11 a square foot. So that gives you an idea of where Mike has a slightly different square footage. There's a drive-through kiosk, things of that nature. But on 189,000, the model rent is $3,230,000. That's what the city is suggesting the model rent should be, and it's higher than most of the in-place leases, even with the inducements. When we take out the inducements, the owner's lease rate, the rent to owner, we believe to be $2,024,605. Now, at the same time, in looking at this analysis, there's vacancy. There's 16,151 square feet of vacant space. You can see it in my page there as vacant. And that 16 amounts to, on 189, amounts to 8.5% vacancy. So even finished, regenerated, it's got 8.5% vacancy, brand new. And just to put it in perspective, Mr. Chairman and I dealt with this property in the 219 or 218 cycle, I believe. And the decision was made by this board, much to our surprise, but it was the right decision, I believe, to ignore it because it was in construction and do land only. Is my recollection correct that it was land only?
Yeah, you're asking me, it was, yeah, a reassessment, and
Yeah.
it was in the middle of getting it torn down,
So now it's
just
built.
land only, and we did it up on.
Yeah. And it hasn't, between the last time it was occupied and operated as a shopping center was probably in 2015. And at that time, there were 144,000 square feet of the former retail Zellers. Before Zellers, it was Kmart, if you remember. Huge space. When you look at Sobeys at 35,000 on average, now looking at doing their superstores at 50,000 plus, this is 65,000 square feet. It's also Save-On Foods. Save-On Foods opened 3 at the same time, and this was a real leap of faith for Save-On to go into a distraught shopping center and do what they've done. They did it primarily because of the international aspect, because there's a lot of ethnic communities out there that they're counting on to be their customer base. Again, when we go back to 2015, we had a 76% vacancy rate, and that's why, and this goes back 10 years. Right? Zellers had gone, they haven't been doing business for over 10 years. So just to give you an idea of the market rent. But the big issue is what should Save-On Foods' real market rent be, or what should be the valuation of the property? I've also, and I'll pass it out at the end, done a similar exercise, putting Save-On in at $10 a square foot. They came along out of the blue and they weren't over demanding, and we have evidence at $10 a square foot, and I'll show you that in just a moment. So that gives you an idea of what our position is on the city's market rent is, model rent is 3.2 million, we're at 2 million if you recognize the inducements. The next few pages are rent roll, and you can have a look, they come off of the same document I just showed you. And they show, just out of curiosity, on page, is that 21? It's right on the printing. 21, on page 21, I'll take you there, panel. Now, Mike mentioned they're ignoring the last phase of some of the development because this is quite a bit higher, but we're looking at 22,000 square feet of vacancy on 187 is 12.2%. So even the 7% that I appreciate Mike offering is not sufficient, not satisfactory. If you go to page 22, this is a tenant list that have been there through the years, and the reason that we've shown this going back to 14, 15, and 16 is just to show we have to try and explain to the board how the property had been redeveloped and lost square footage, and that was because it was demolished, space was completed demolition. But the vacancy rates for, just so you know, getting back to vacancy, and if there was ever chronic vacancy, it happened at Northgate Shopping Center until Save-On came along. The vacancy in 2014 was 61.8%, in 2015 was 56.56%, and the vacancy in 216 was 58,000, 58%, I'm sorry. If you flip the page, this is a save on lease. It's a 15-year term. It steps up every 5 years. It's, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, on page 23. Save on lease, it started in November of 2016. Again, they started when the mall wasn't finished. 5-year lease, 15-year lease, going in 3 5-year step-ups. Total lease payment is $14 million. Landlord costs, and that's not landlord building things and saying that's what we spent. That was money paid to them to refurbish their own space. The landlord paid his own money for the exterior and the parking and things that they need, curbs, right-of-ways, et cetera, et cetera. So the net to landlord is $6.79 a square foot. If you go to, oh, there's the one we just talked about, the decision on page 24, and you'll see that the board decided that it would be more appropriate to carry this at land only, 17,000, and wait for the SUP, and we did. If you go to retail rent comps on page 25, this will give you an idea of some of the rents that people pay. And I've got one that's particularly interesting, and that's halfway down, 1, 2, 3. And the reason it's interesting, it's on today's docket. And we had on McIver Mall on Henderson Highway, it's about 60,000 square feet. It had one major anchor tenant called Marketplace. And Marketplace were in a long-term lease, they were paying $8.50 a square foot. They decided not to renew their lease. They decided because these large stores were coming in, they thought they were too small to be a supermarket and too large to be a convenience store. So they didn't renew their lease. Their lease was at $8.50 and was offered to them for another term at another $8.50. And that's a store that competes with, that's a food store. That's Marketplace Foods, right in the middle, 1795 Henderson Highway, $8.50 a square foot. We have that file coming up in a moment, so we'll talk about it then. The others we put in are just some retail rent comps around the area we talked about. Again, 2065 Pembina we're doing today, and that's $13 a square foot. Winners pay $8 a square foot. There's also an Oriental food market called Daily Oriental Original Supermarket in 2065 Pembina. They pay $10 a square foot. And the reason I do this and suggest this is if we were to take the assessor's calculation of market rent and just adjust the save-ons to $10 a square foot, we would have an owner rent of $12.99 overall. I'll pass that out as soon as I finish my presentation. Here's the news release. We all know what happened. They opened 3 stores. 60,000 plus was new for them. That's just a news release. This is something that I'm sure you won't want to do it today, but when you get home tonight and you're relaxing, you might want to read about the unmalling of the, if you haven't heard enough about retail, the unmalling of Northgate Shopping Center. And this was just really tells you everything about it, the contributions they made, the 65,000 square foot. They set up a new Tim Hortons. I'll give you some background information. A major REIT, real estate investment trust in Winnipeg, who I represent, made an offer to buy this shopping center from Mr. Charn, who passed away his estate, and Mr. Thorstenson. They made an offer to buy it about 10 years ago, but it was subject to them securing a lease at $3 a square foot with Target. But they want Target to take the whole thing as a distribution center. Target didn't choose Winnipeg, so that lease, that offer to purchase fell off. But their development side is called Mar West Management, and they're the people that do the construction. They saw an opportunity to marry Northgate with Save-On and build this facility. So Mar West took equity in Northgate with the then 50% owner. So Northgate has new owners as well, and people that are well versed. But it was intended or considered, an offer was made with a deposit that was returned. It was going to be a major REIT in Winnipeg buying it, but those were the conditions, because they're only paying $6 a square foot as Zellers and $4 for the storage component. So, the little stories there, it's kind of interesting. I found it interesting. If we just flip a page or two, we'll get to it. This is a new lease on life for one struggling North End shopping center. That article was written in 2016, so that's how long this has been around. And they talk about the Out of Province family. And those are the people that own 50% with Mr. Charn and Mr. Thorstenson. They talk about it being a massive undertaking. The mall fell on tough times after the 120,000 square foot Zellers closed and left it more than half empty. It was 58 to 70% empty. Adding to its woes was the high cost of maintaining the closed mall, which made it challenging to attract tenants. And it was this idea of demoling is try to make it as close as you can to a power center, and leaving the main core in place. They just, as part of the transformation, better I read it than tell you because I'll forget. The owners are demolishing the back portion of the L-shaped mall, redoing the exterior of the remaining complex, and building several new single and multi-tenant buildings on the property. They're changing the look of the center and giving new life. Michelle Constant said that Save-On is taking a good chunk of the Zeller space, took 65,000 of the 140. That's a good chunk. And also caused the shopping center to build the gymnasium, which is 25,000 square feet. And so on and so on and so on. The next of the portions are recoverable, and we ask that the decision is made that we board reinstate the 5% non-recoverable costs. And what I'd like to do, if I could, is pass out these. It's just the rent roll with the adjustment for the.
Well, you can pass to the chairman, he can decide if it's new information or if it's what he wants to do with it.
This is a recap of your.
This is in regards, I guess, Sid, to your change of a rate per square foot?
Yeah, I'm saying that
Okay.
if, there's two ways that this can be done. One is,
Well-
the board can decide what a fair market rent is, when there's these inducements. It's a never-ending problem. So I'm saying if we use the net to owners in the $6 or $8 and $7 or $8.
So
We use $10, we just show.
on your original, it's $10.70 a square foot, right?
Yes,
Okay,
right.
so on this one here,
Do you want me to hand this out to everybody then?
sure,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's just a recap of Michael's page, and all I did is I took the, so it'll be easier for you to understand. I took the Save On Foods, and I put in at $10 rather than, in our brief, our first request, I have it at $6.79, and I provided you the calculation. So that's on page 6 of our brief. You'll see right in the middle, the Save On $8 million incentive. That gives net to landlord, to land this tenant, $6.79. If that's not acceptable, because there's legislation that we don't look at net effective rents. This isn't net effective rents, this is landlord contribution to get the tenant. Might just be some words, but the other alternative is to say, well, what is the market? And with this, I've shown you, or you have a food store at $10.50, I've showed you a food store on Henderson Highway that didn't renew at $8.50. So I've given you proof at $10 a square foot. I think it's reasonable, based on economy of scale. So I'm saying at 8, it would be $12.99. So recalculation. That makes sense, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Taylor, any questions?
Of everything, or just this one page?
Just this one thing.
It's a big
Just the one
plaza.
thing? So with this, you're still kind of doing your tenant inducement argument, but not really?
No, we're taking it out.
Taking it all out on all the units?
Just a moment. hang
Because you
on.
took it out of,
We took it out of some one, there's one I
half
took
the
it out.
center.
Just 1 second, I can't recall. 378, 650. 164. I believe we took them out of all of them. Same one. It's here. Price 104. Let's see, Dollarama. Dollarama. 20. Yeah, they're out, they're not in the, take out the inducements. I'm waiting. Maybe we could have a minute break just to check my calculation, Mr. Chair.
Okay, want to take a 5-minute break?
Is that okay?
Sure. We'll call the hearing back to order. I think Mr. Story just passed out.
Just passed. No, I didn't.
No,
I was just resting.
okay, he just closed his eyes. He passed out some literature. Mr. Taylor, any questions? Just in regards to the one page that you have there.
not really. I mean, the only thing I really have is vacancy, that you're stating a new vacancy rate of 8.5%.
I'm not asking for it, I'm just showing you what the actual is.
Yeah, oh no, that just, it contradicts with what I've reported here on my page where it's 7%. Cause I've taken out the owner's space and some other spaces that just aren't reported. So, you're just asking for 5 and I'm saying it's 7, so. That was my only question on this new page. I got questions on the other stuff though, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, I'll just, Ms. Nisbet, any questions in
No.
regards to the handout?
I have none.
Okay. I think, Mr. Story, you're finished with your presentation, so you're
Yeah,
open for
pretty well,
questions?
yeah, yes.
Mr. Taylor?
I'll do a summation if I can.
Shortly.
Yeah.
Mr. Taylor?
Okay. Well, first question is, what is the value you're looking for today? Can you really run down that with your new
Page
calculation?
3.
Page 3?
Hang on, page 3. Yes, page 3 of our brief, we're suggesting that the accessory market rent of 16 be reduced to $10.70, and that's taking out the inducements.
No, like the final value you're looking for is 22,113,000? This is my question.
Yes.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
So this new page doesn't have any play in what you're saying? You're still staying at 1070?
Correct, I'm just saying to the board that there's another
Okay.
methodology, and that's to put in a market rent, fee simple market rent for a grocer, and that way you eliminate the consideration to the inducement.
Okay. On that same point, so moving to your page 8, you're believing that the feasible market rent for Save on Foods is $6.79 a square foot then?
Well, that's the value to landlord, correct. So on a 15-year lease, they cut a check for $8 million.
That's the value to the landlord, but that's not the fee simple or market rent for the space then, that's what you're saying.
Not necessarily.
Are you aware of what the rate per square foot the other Save on Foods signed at when they moved?
Well, they all signed with inducements, so I don't know, I haven't seen the leases. You can't look at what their face rent is and determine if that's market. No, I don't know. I've been to the other stores, I don't know. They're quite a bit smaller, so. And I would presume, I'm making an assumption, but if they will ask for this kind of inducement to come here, I would think going to Bridgeport, brand new market, they probably would ask for inducements as well. One we're gonna be talking about a little while on Henderson Highway, ended up signing a lease with Loblaws, and Loblaws inducements are automatic, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the danger with inducements and trying to include them in, is you don't
Yeah.
have any lease agreements here to suggest the $8 million was, all you have is a spreadsheet and your word that they paid $8 million exactly as a tenant inducement, so.
No, it wasn't, that's the point, it's not tenant, they gave the money to save on to be able to develop the corner, the end cap, to look like to be equal to a freestanding Save-On's food store, but larger than they'd ever done before. 65,000 square feet is a very large store,
Yeah.
food store.
Flipping over to your comparables on page 25, more than half of them are just the subject property.
Yep,
And all the subject property leases you used occurred before they did any of this demolling, correct? They're all in 16, 17, 14, older leases.
Which page are you on, Mike?
I'm on your page 25, your market rent comparables.
Okay, and you're asking are any of these leases, yeah, the leases, well, the first, these are in different shopping centers, yes, they're, the first one is 206, the next just is a renewal at 218, it's a 201 here, which is Winners. Daily Supermarket is a 250, it's current lease at 1050, that's a food store. I got a ton of things here.
It's okay, we're good. Thank you.
Daily Original Market is 1050, that's a 215 lease, that's market. The big one though, very interesting, is Marketplace Foods. Because that's an 850, he's offering renewal at 850.
I think you're getting away from my question here.
Oh, I thought you said, were these all in place before the?
Well, I was talking about the ones only for the subject property.
Oh, only the subject, all right.
So you have 12 comps here, 7 of them you're
Well,
using,
Simplex been there a long time.
you're using the subject property to support the subject property market
Yes.
rent, first off.
Yes, that's okay.
And the subject property rents, you use, my point is you're using ones before, like there's been a significant physical change to this property with Jollibee and Save-On Foods being there, which would attract different tenancies. So I'm suggesting the rental comparables here are not reflective of for the
Well,
subject. The ones you're
the
highlighting aren't relative to what we're looking at
The
today.
three big ones are the last three, and they're all 217. And they started their food save-on, if you remember my initial dissertation, they started their lease in 216. So these came,
Save-On did, yes, but the total physical change to the site occurred after these is my question.
after which?
These leases were all signed. I mean, lots of these are
Well,
renewals too.
they opened the Save-On store in 2016.
Yes.
These three leases, the three big ones at the bottom, were all signed in 217, so clearly it was there. Jollibee came after, as did Oshkosh came after.
Yeah,
And the reason you mentioned earlier about vacancy, they don't build unless they have a tenant. So you're not gonna see, hopefully, if they're continuing to
my
thrive.
point is just that the market rent you're gonna get for a property as fully developed is gonna be different from one where they've got
Well, these are
they've got
comparable.
bulldozers and tearing down the building, or ones where you're using renewals that were signed eons ago. And that's, I'm just highlighting the fact that you've got 7 here,
Well,
to
good
support
luck.
your
Just
market
if I can
rents.
just interrupt you for a minute. Fitness for Life, they were built as a condition of the store. So clearly, they're there because of Save-On. That's the condition. The landlord had to build that store for them to release it to them. The next one, Dollarama, was there before and got demolished, got moved out of their spot where they had the big sign and the big visibility. And that might be why they had a part of their inducement, I'm not sure, but it might be. And Fro Nails, they're nail people and they were right at the, I don't know if you know them all, where Joey's used to be, and they're the part that got taken out. They're gone, they were demolished.
Well,
So they have
I'm
that.
just suggesting that that's not what would be an indication of market rent, because you're using stuff basically that's been gone.
Well, the reason I gave you some stuff, I didn't think it. In the 215 year, this is before the renovation was contemplated, or not finalized, we'll say. The typical market rent for CRU is $8.50 a square foot in Northgate, the old Northgate.
Yeah.
And why was it low? It was low because it was an enclosed mall and common areas were so high that your net effective rent gets reduced because people say, well, if I'm gonna pay extra $2 a square foot for common area costs in this enclosed mall, I'm gonna pay less in base rent because I can't afford it. That's why regional malls, enclosed regional malls are gone now, because the cost of operating has to be added to the common areas of the tenants. So that's what they were getting at the time. They were getting $6.04 the last time Zellers paid rent, which was about 5 years ago. The
Again,
bank-
similarly, we've had other properties like Grant Park that I've looked at, this reassessment, where they're trying to suggest these $6 rents that were signed before I was born in the 70s as being market rent. And I'm suggesting
Before I
that,
was born.
that this property has gone under major renovations, major changes, and renewals going back that far, or even into the 90s or early 2000s, are not applicable anymore because it's a different, hearing de novo, physical changes, this place is completely different than it was when I was.
Well, I guess I don't get your answer because I don't know which property, other than the cinema,
Okay,
nothing. was-
gentlemen, if we wanted to get
Okay, yes.
through,
Or
okay,
on surface,
let's
Yeah,
pick up the pace.
yeah.
Okay. And the rest of your rental comparables we're looking at today, so we're gonna be talking about those later, but the
Yeah.
marketplace is no longer there, but you're using it as rental comparable.
It's, it was there at the reference date, and it's now called No Frills. It's a Loblaw store. We're paying $14 a square foot because they too have inducements.
Page 26. So you put a bunch of media releases in about Northgate and stuff. I'm gonna keep my point just to the fact that,
Yeah.
to highlight that the larger footprint also serves, we've gone through this with other retail properties like IKEA and whatever. Okay, so in the, which paragraph is this? 6th paragraph where it says the Northgate Save on Foods will serve as a delivery hub for the city. So they do most of their citywide deliveries out of this store then, that's why they have a larger
No.
footprint?
These are media releases. What are they gonna say? We probably don't do much business? This is just saying that they're doing, I didn't know they delivered, but apparently they do according to this. I don't know. Do people order from it?
Yes, they do. Yes, they
I don't
do.
know. They might. If they said they do it, they do it.
Well, it's got the other three locations at the bottom. You've talked about it before, that our ones are smaller stores.
Yes.
So all my point is only that they use this also as the delivery hub, which it states, again, it's a media release from the company. So my suggestion then would be that they have this store and pick this location and the larger square footage based on the fact they can accommodate their online shopping, correct?
They'd be very optimistic if they built 65,000 square feet, hoping they'd have lots of delivery. I didn't know they delivered. I don't know. I can't answer that. I'm not.
Because, yeah,
an
the other
expert.
stores are smaller and wouldn't handle that capacity is my point. and
Well, I'm sure they
suggestion.
can deliver. Why could you not deliver from Bridgewater 35,000 square feet that you can in Northgate? Doesn't make sense, but I'm not sure.
Those
I
are
don't
my
have
questions.
answers.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Nesbit.
No questions.
Mr. McIntyre?
Just one question, and since both of you mentioned that there was a sup on this property, was it appealed?
Sup?
Yeah.
No, it was 11 million, I think. I've got it here, just if you can, I've got it in the brief. The reason it wasn't appealed, Mr. Secretary, is we were hoping that, we expected another sup to follow because they're still building. It was 11 million,
What page are you on?
page 15. And you see the reference to, and that was the board, so I recall, Mike, you can verify this. The board made that suggestion that it should be,
Page 24.
because there's such extraordinary rent, Mr. Secretary, that there's a vacancy, like 70% vacancy, because they're building it at the time. So the board suggested to do land only and wait for a sub, but the next cycle came around instead.
So if I'm looking at the board order issued on page 24,
Yeah.
it's for the 2018 realty roll.
Mhm.
It's not the sup. It's the base.
I thought it was a sub, but I'm getting it wrong.
So back
Maybe
to my,
Mike knows it. Do you know, are you familiar with it?
This order is from the, yeah, it's from the base. We were at the hearing. It was a mess. The thing, like, the buildings weren't completed yet. Essentially, I said like the city wants to issue a sup which can later be appealed. And we decided something needed to be done, so I recommended a land value only at the $11 million, not reflecting any building value at all at that point. Because it was just, like I said, there's trains and bulldozers everywhere, so we did that at the hearing, which was in the fall of 2017, December 4th.
December 4th.
What, 2 years and a day ago?
So I guess my question still
We
is.
did put out a sup. I did it
Department
myself.
issued us up.
Yeah, and it was not.
And it wasn't appealed? Okay, thank you. That was my only question.
Summation, either party? Mr. Taylor?
Mine, yeah, would just be about, market rents. I mean, instead of over and above a million times this reassessment, but, yeah, that old leases aren't necessarily market rents. Especially when you have redevelopment like we have here at the subject, which is really important. I've also put in the time to go carefully through the site, and I feel like the recommended value is reflective of market value. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Story.
No, thank you. I just, I'll say something very quickly. The whole issue here is the save on inducement, Dollarama inducement, fitness. All we're asking is the board to recognize what fee simple market rent would be for 65,000 square foot food store. I brought you evidence of 1050, 850. There are some food stores that are around. One that's very close is one that you see in the theater today. So I just, I've given you the calculation as the developer, the owner, sees his return. He sees it in the net of the inducement. I've also given you the alternative of having a fee simple rate supported by comps of $10 a square foot, and that would give you $12.99 versus $16.25 in the assessment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go on to 2065 Pembina Highway. Mr. Taylor, whenever you're ready.
I need a moment, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, certainly.
Slower, you guys. Do you guys have any blank pages in your mail, or in your brief? Like pages 19, 20-ish? 24?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Should be a whole bunch for
Yeah,
the
we have a
mailer.
lot of blank pages.
Yeah, 23, 22.
Those are the ones that just for the mailer came through as blank pages, and sorry, I just put it in.
So you have to get, oh.
I just got this up.
There's nothing there, there's nothing that.
The order. So, Mr. Story, we're going to go to 2065.
I'm
Mr.
all set,
Taylor,
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Taylor, you're up.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay. For 2065 Pembina Highway, the file number is 19-4174. The roll number is 030916433200. The proposed 2020 valuation today, it suggests there's an error on the front page, but it's $29,016,000, which is what you'll see on my page 8 and 9. So 29,016. A larger neighborhood shopping center, again, we're looking at over 100,000 square feet. Built between the years 1985 and 2007. 4-to-1 land to building ratio here, just on Pembina Highway, just south of Bishop Grandin. Page 2 has shows that the subject got income and expense questionnaires from the owner and the reported rents on those mailers. For the subject property, they're listed on pages 2 and 3. We have rental comparables listed on pages, I threw a lot in on Pembina Highway here. Just showing different market rents there. We got some low mezzanine basement space, too high stuff in and around the area, again, retail stuff also. As I mentioned before, we're looking at a value of $29,016,000. That's on pages 8 and 9. So model-driven rents here across the board. Vacancy for neighborhood shopping center being 4%. We talked about shortfall 8%. Standard neighborhood shopping center stuff. Cap rate being 7.3% again, which is at the 80th percentile on the bell curve there for reassessment values for cap rates. Getting to that $29,016,000 you see on page 9. Page 13. I'm going too fast here for you guys.
No, it's good.
You mean 12?
You got page 12? Yeah, page 12. Mine's 13 because I have the tenants for my comp. So page 12 for you guys, just has the aerial photographs, so it shows all the different, kind of like the pad site restaurants at the front. We got some smaller CRUs at the back, and then we got the bigger just store and Winners also. Also there too, but yeah, fronting Pembina Highway. Similarly, like we've seen today, I feel like this is the last one I did it for. The page should be 32 for you guys. I put mailer rent on this one again, so good to go. Not ODC, but it means the same thing. Just showing the model rents per square foot in comparison to the owner reported rents. Again, some are higher, some are lower. I'm suggesting that they're all market today for the spaces, physical spaces. Have inspected the subject property, looked at all the spaces that were there. We have a low vacancy on this property here today. And when we're looking at the totals at the bottom, you can see that the city's $3,500 off what's reported. There, the 2,296,540 is really close to the $2.3 million that's reported as the potential rent that you'd see there. After that, we really just have the appendices, but again, that 2.3 or just short of 2.3 million is what we would be looking on pages 8 and 9. For the model-driven potential rent for the subject property, that's page 8, sorry. And then page 9 would just have those same factors for neighborhood shopping. Again, I said there was low vacancy, we're still applying the standard 4% here. And then we're using that cap rate of 7.3% for the subject. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Story, questions?
Yes, page 32 of your brief. So the model rent is $22.96, and the mailer rent, or the rent roll provided by the owner, is $2,003,000.
Yeah.
So it's higher. That'll be a first for the assessment department. The models are typically higher, are they not?
No.
No? Do you look at premise area 1440?
1440?
Yeah, near the bottom.
Just one?
Yeah.
Sure.
That's 278,850?
That's what they're reporting. I took the numbers right from the mailer and.
And when you go to your 28056, which one is that?
Which one are you looking at here?
It's 3 from the bottom.
29056?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
same number.
Oh yeah, sorry, that's weird.
It's not weird, it explains
It explains the
why you're
discrepancy.
higher. You can't have high, your models never are higher.
I mean,
I've
oh,
recalculated
they're
why.
always higher than the actuals, or
Pardon me?
you
No, you can't.
recalculated it?
This one tenancy was duplicated here, that's all.
Yeah.
The actual, when you take that out,
Put $13 instead.
the actual rents are $2,018,520.
Grayson, what number did you say you had?
I have a handout if you want it. I have, mailer rents are, 2,036,882.
Yeah, 2,040,397.48.
Yeah, it's because there's a drive-through teller there that we show as having, the owner just takes the income as other income, not through the rent roll.
What's your adding on?
So that's why we're at the slight amount, but the large amount is a duplication.
Yeah, because I took that off and I put the $13 square foot at the smaller square footage, which gives another 18,850 instead of the. So essentially, it's 360,000 higher than it should be. Essentially, what I'm saying.
Okay,
Anyways,
those are all my questions. I think that's enough.
Ms. Nesbitt?
Okay, so I see that it's duplicated on your page 32,
yep,
but is it duplicated in your model on page 7?
no. Well,
So-
let's go to premise.
I see 1440 there, that's the Bisque linen and furniture, 29056. There seems to be some storage, office,
That's the mezzanine
beds,
space,
but
yeah.
that's the premise number,
Yeah.
so it's not duplicated in the model.
No, it's not duplicated, and like they report on the rent roll, it's at $13, and that'd be 18,850 instead of the 15,341. But no, that's my mistake for not
Just-
finding that out.
But
Yeah.
just in this page?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, just on page 33.
okay. Again, a 7.3 cap, so similar cap to
What we just looked
the
at.
one we just looked at. So can you explain why that cap on this property? The last one, it was older, poor location.
Yeah, so you have some older premises here too. 85 to 2007. I think the most recent one, the 2007 one, was because the Applebee's here burnt down, and they had to rebuild it back in 2007.
Right.
Is that a
There's
loss or
also,
increase the cap rate 5 years? What the, it increases cap rate? And it reduces it?
No, I said the 2007 one,
Okay.
you have lots of older space here, that's why we were using
Yeah.
7.3. The newest spaces, yeah, the Applebee's is what I'm saying.
because it was rebuilt.
Yeah.
So that brings up to 2007, so what portion of it would be like newer versus older? Can you
Well-
give me a,
Give you a hint?
yeah?
Well, like the Applebee's is 5,500 square feet, and we're looking at a total of 132,000, so.
So most of it is in
Most-
that 1985?
Yeah, most of it will be older, older structures here. Similar to the last property, I mean, we're looking at always using newer, even with the older, like the last property we looked at, the Save on Foods was still in the older
So
part of the
in this
building.
one, is it really just the Applebee's that's newer?
The Applebee's, the only thing was built in 2007, yes,
Okay, and so everything would be
before then,
before that?
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Brent?
I have no questions.
I have none either. Mr. Story, the floor is yours.
Thank you. If you go to page 3, we'll cut to the quick. These are the different classifications. I've handled this property for about a dozen years, and this is how we've done it. We've analyzed it. I've got a handout that corrects that error. May I give it? Or should I talk to it first? I'll talk about it first, and then come back to it.
Well, you might as well hand it out because,
Okay.
you know, it's a correction.
Yeah.
So we can follow along with the
Yeah.
correction.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so page 3, we'll go through it quickly. You'll see under the owner's assessment, under that column in the middle, that the potential revenue is $2,134,027. If you look at today's handout, that's the number to the right, mail outs, $22,036,036. Difference is a kiosk at the top, you can see. The city's using a position of 2268, and it's inappropriate. 7.5, we've talked about cap rate. I asked you to carry forward these arguments. This is a an older shopping center that's been very, very successful. Got a little breath of fresh air when the new stadium opened out that way. It's entitled to a 7.5 cap, in my opinion, based on the information that we have about retail cap rates and the way the city is treating them. We don't differ much. The only difference we have is that we believe that $2,034,027 is more appropriate as the owner's market rent, which is a mailer rent and the actual rent, than the 226,8330. The shopping center is very, very well maintained. I don't consider it to be old in relative terms. Cap rate is reasonable based on the economic conditions of retailing. It does have a fair number, probably an abnormal number of food outlets in it. And food outlets traditionally have somewhat higher risk. So I don't think 7.5 is inappropriate. City's at 7.2. I would suggest an assessment of $22,875,193.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor, questions?
Why a higher vacancy of 6%?
6%, I use the Stevenson report on citywide vacancy on retail at 6%.
Okay. You're using actual income for your valuation, correct?
Yes, yeah,
And the actual shortfall
yeah.
calculation, which is based off the vacancy.
Mhm.
But your vacancy, you're using a market vacancy, but not market rents for your
Well, so
vacancy.
the market vacancy is what people are anticipating vacancy will be, and you've got to take into consideration current economic conditions. Fact is, a lot of food services. There is an anchor there that's Winners. Some people don't feel Winners is an anchor tenant. It's a draw, but not an anchor tenant necessarily. So I think it's reasonable.
But the actual vacancy was much less than 6%.
The actual vacancy. Was 788 square feet on 131, so it'd be much less than that,
Yeah.
yes.
Those are the questions then.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Nesbitt?
No, I have no questions.
Mr. McIntyre?
I have a couple. Page 3, you've got the assessor's workup on the right-hand side.
Yes.
So when I compare it with his workup, the vacancy is 4%, not 4.1.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Shortfall is $8, not $7.09.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be 7.9 cents. Thank you. Sorry.
And the assessor's cap rate is 7.3, not 7.2.
Thank you.
That was my question.
Thank you.
What was that cap rate again? 7 point?
7.3 is the assessor's.
Okay. Summation? Either party?
No, we're fine, thank
Okay.
you.
We'll go to 1151 Pembina Highway. Mr. Taylor? Mr. Story, ready?
Just 1 second. sir.
Okay. $11.51,
Yeah.
okay.
You guys all ready?
Okay, Sid?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Taylor?
151 from the highway, the file number is 19-3911. The roll number is 0307-1699100. The proposed 2020 reassessment value is $2,349,000. Again, we're looking at a smaller property here right now, but older, built in 57 and 66. Income expense questionnaires were filled out for 16 and 17. The subject property leases on page 2. Well, according to the board's attention to those aren't necessarily consistent with when I'm calculating them in the expense questionnaires that were submitted. However, but looking at page 14, they are consistent with what was inputted in the online data collection system, the ODC system. The owner would have put those numbers in directly himself, so, but yeah, they don't correspond with other income statements, so take them with a grain of salt on page 2. Following that, I have rental comparables again in the Pembina area, looking at older retail rental amounts. So we have a good range there, but I'm not sure which page it is for you guys. I'm guessing 6 is the income valuation.
Yep.
Yes.
So it shows a variety of tenancies there. The basement tenancy we have is premise ID 26795. Only did a drive-by inspection of this property, so I'm not familiar with the insides of this one, opposed to some of the other ones we looked at today. But all model-driven rents and all the other parameters we've seen earlier today for neighborhood shopping centers, again, 4% for vacancy, $8 for shortfall, and cap rate of 7.3, which is at the end of the bell curve there. Page 9 for you guys would be the aerial photographs of the subject property, showing it there just on the west side of Pembina, backs onto the train tracks, right at Rockman there, right by the engineering plant, just behind on Rockman Street. Yeah, a bunch of different tenancies there. So flipping over to the mailer on pages 11 through 16. So I have a rent roll and mailer that was filled out by Sid. See signed bottom of page 11. Page 12.
Excuse me, did you say it's by me?
No, the person's name is Sid.
Oh, jeez, I am losing it.
Yeah, like it says your name right here.
It is his name.
Yeah. Says Sid Story for
Where are you looking?
The mailer.
page
Bottom of the
11.
Page 11.
Page before that, Sid.
Page 10.
Page
Right
10.
there.
Page 10, sorry.
Page
My pages are delayed by a page.
Just to complicate your life.
Yeah, I complicate my life when I'm talking here. So you filled out this mailer,
Well,
anyways.
I didn't fall together, I signed it, I don't know why.
Oh,
Isn't that odd? I don't know.
I just thought Sid.
anyways,
Yes.
so page 11 though has the rent roll and tenant verification form there. So it has the super blinds, night owl, the pharmacy, the TV place or whatever. Some are showing presenting as gross, although the super blind says it's 1138 gross and includes all, or it has all those things amounted in there, but then the next two tenancies show as $16 and $18.58, but then there's all the recoveries, so I'm really not sure here with what's reported there on pages 11, 12. Look at page 13 and 14, the amounts are different, and like I said on page 14, the same exact property, same tenancies we're looking at. The rent that was imputed by whoever, I'm not sure, for the owner, has those amounts that correspond with page 2, so it shows that 2103, the 2822, the 2864. So it's confusing to say the least, but I just wanted to draw the board's attention to that. So really, we're not looking at the actuals there, or the gross ones as being what the city's using it for. It's all based on the model again, and really, I only have my drive-by inspection to back up, and the rental comparables to back up most of those rents in the $14 range. Thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Story, questions of the assessor?
Yes, just to clarify the name situation. There was a problem with the legibility of the questionnaire that we had. So if you go to page, I'm gonna do some, apologize anyway, page 8 of our brief. This is what,
This is,
You're asking me questions.
these are
Oh, I'm
questions
sorry.
to the assessor.
sorry. No question. Oh, I know I should ask a question. You haven't been in the building?
No, not been inside.
Okay, you're aware it's a former Ringer's drugstore?
Nope. We didn't have this one last cycle, so I don't know what it is.
Okay, it's a former drugstore,
Yep,
and it has 4 different components. Are you aware it has 4 small, 400 or 500 square foot offices upstairs?
yep,
Okay, and you're aware that it has a basement with a very, very low ceiling that is used by a church?
yep.
Okay,
They rent out, yeah.
yeah, and it has on the main floor, it has super blinds.
Yep.
But only 2,900, they had 5,500, but he sold super blinds, the same owner owns the building. You know, you're familiar with that? And then right at the back is a pharmaceutical place, which is disguised because it dispenses drugs with people with social problems. It's called South Point Pharmacy.
So the Super Blinds was owner occupied for the mailer then?
No, I think they sold, I think,
You said the same owner as the property as the owner of Super Blinds. I'm just trying to keep up.
yeah, well, that's what I believe it. It's Super Blinds, Glenn Carr owns the building and owned Super Blinds, and the lease that you mentioned had been superseded when it was sold. You mentioned there was a lease for Super Blinds for $11 or something.
No, they have 2 different amounts reported. One's at $0 and the other one's at $11 gross, so I wasn't sure what's going on there.
So what, okay. Those are all my questions, thanks, let's go through them
Thank you,
really
Mr.
quickly.
Ms. Nesbit,
No questions?
Mr. McIntyre,
I have no questions.
Mr. Taylor, floor is, Mr.
My
Story. Mr. Story.
Okay, we'll go to page 3, the infamous page 3. We're accepting everything other than the cap rate. This is a very difficult building. It has a ceiling, Mr. Taylor has his field notes. The ceiling is way, way below code in the basement. They rent the basement out. We had trouble again understanding the rent roll. I'll ask you to turn to page turn to page 8, and this is what was provided to us by the owner, and we just eventually threw our hands up, we couldn't decipher it. Have a look at that rent roll. But I have subsequently found out what the circumstance is, and I can try and figure this out now. Super blinds and drapery are the occupied part of the main floor. Then it's something called here's called Night Owl, but it's changed names 3 times. That's what used to be Daily Burgers, and then it's now a noodle soup place. That's when it was called Night Owl, somewhere in between. There's 3 or 4 restaurants in the West of the Well. Then the South Point Pharmacy is number 4 there. And then something called Wenbo, and Wenbo occupies the 4 offices on the 2nd floor. They're very modest offices, and Wenbo is a Korean immigration service to help people get here. I have a report from the owner late last night, because I had trouble contacting him, and I'm going to stay with my original brief, but I want you to know the information, because it was very difficult to figure out off the rent rolls. Wenbo have the 4 rooms upstairs. They pay $12 a square foot, triple net. Super blinds are on the main floor, and that they had $5,500, $11 a square foot. They cut down to $29.35. I believe it was because of the sale at $12. So it's at $12 as well. The basement church pays $3 a square foot, albeit triple net, for 2,600 square feet in the basement. And South Point Pharmacy at the back of the building, not visible from the street, pays $12 a square foot. So the average, they works out to $12.01 a square foot. And it was just confusing the rent roll didn't make any sense, because Wenbo showed the full amount for the floor of one office upstairs, and I think it confused the assessment department as well. So I'll just ask at this point to the board to, I won't ask for a reduction. The actual rent is $12.01. I'll accept everything here because we erred, and the owner erred. But I would ask that the cap rate be 8%. Because of the age of the building, it's an older building. He did refront it, looks very nice. The uncertainty of the restaurant, there's been 4, I believe, in the last 3 years. The unique tenant that services their clientele from the back of the building, and the immigration office, which you don't go into the main building to get to it, you go up a side stair. There's no elevators or anything of that nature. And up until recently, it wasn't, couldn't get occupancy because it was access only, no egress. And so we put a steel fire alarm in the fire escape. So I would ask the board to consider increasing the cap rate by the uniqueness, the age, and coming to an assessment of $2,031,317. Oh, I'm sorry, wrong. My number's higher. Oh, yes. I'm sorry, $2,031,317. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor, questions?
No, it's really just the cap rate.
Okay.
Cap.
Ms. Nesbitt,
No questions.
Mr. McIntyre,
No questions.
summation needed, party?
No.
Sorry. Let's go on to McGilvery, 2190. Mr. Taylor.
So the second to get off the floor.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, I'm all set.
You guys are good. 2190 McGilvery Boulevard is file number 19-4178. And it's roll number 030664090690. Sorry. The proposed 2020 valuation is $21,414,000. 3 buildings on site. We have Shoppers, the Cineplex VIP theaters, and a Pancake House there. We're using a total leasable area today of 67,063, basically as reported. Page 2 shows we got income and expense questionnaires. Shows the subject property leases as below, the Shoppers, Cineplex, and the Pancake House, like I said before. We got some rental comparables here also. Flipping to page 6 to cut to the chase. I don't believe there's any disagreement for rent, so I'm not gonna belabor that. Other than really the Cineplex stuff we kind of discussed with Cineplex on their own, but we are below what they're actually receiving there. We're below what they're receiving for the Shoppers, and the city is slightly above the actual rent. I mean, if you guys are flipping back and forth for the Pancake House. But all those model rents are in the market range. Keeping it focused here, really again, we're deferring on cap rates. We're classifying this as a retail warehouse stream, so it's differing from the last ones where we're looking at neighborhood shopping centers. With that, really, you still get the same vacancy allowances for larger format retail. I mean, really, larger format retail here being the Cineplex and the Shoppers, and you also have the pad freestanding Pancake House there also, but predominantly most of the income is coming from the other 2 tenancies. So retail warehouse, 4% for vacancy, 2% unrecovered expenses, and the shortfall we see here being at $6 instead of $8 for neighborhood shopping centers, with a cap rate of 6.15%. I believe Sid's looking for 7.25. Anyways, that's my submission today, thank you.
Mr. Story, questions?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt?
I know.
Mr. McIntyre?
And I have no questions.
Okay, have none. So Mr. Story, the floor is yours.
Yes, we're here just to talk about cap rate today. This is a purpose, the cinema itself is a purpose-built building. It's built for a cinema. It's built with something called stadium seating, which means that there is no sloped floor, no opportunity to retrofit or reuse the building. It's actual concrete steps that you're sitting on when you're in the theater. So it's very, very risky for a developer to build for a theater company. Theater companies have had some history of financial issues over the years as well. But most importantly, their industry is being challenged by Netflix and home entertainment, and it's a risky endeavor to build. They need 1,200 parking stalls to be able to develop the property further, i.e. adding Shoppers and Original Pancake House. They had to forfeit some of their parking, and they were compensated in lump sum payment. That's the cinema. So I'm telling you, if you're just suggesting that if you are an investor looking at buying a shopping center or retail, first of all, retail is risky to start with. Add to that the change in lifestyle with respect to movies and watching movies on demand. And we watch The Irishman at home the same time it's playing for theaters. We save $35. So they're risky properties. They are right across Canada. We do work with Cineplex, and cap rates are traditionally higher because owners are reluctant to develop them because they are single purpose. So I think that 7.25 is reflective of the market. It's supported again by the City of Winnipeg as a 7.421, 1271 Jefferson, which is the IGA garden market and whatnot. And it's at 7.44, so 7.25 might even be on the low side for a cinema. The other is Pancake House, is a local chain, and they're a food service restaurant, so they have some risk as well, abnormal risk. And Shoppers Drug Mart and Shoppers, and they're, I think, perhaps more bankable in terms of developers. So I'd ask that the 7.25 cap rate be considered. 6.15 I think is inappropriate for any retail, and specifically this type of retail. Thank you.
I have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Ms. Nesbitt?
I have no questions.
And I have no questions.
No questions? Okay, somebody issue in either party?
No, not for me.
No? Okay. Okay.
Just a quick restroom break, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry?
We get a quick washroom break.
Yes, sir. Bring back to order. So we're gonna go to 827 Dakota Street. Mr. Taylor, the floor is yours.
File number is 19-4176. Roll number 0802099850 for 827 Dakota Street. The proposed 2020 assessment value is $23,361,000. Should see the subject property on page 2. It's a long strip mall across from St. Mathilde Center. Income and expense questionnaires were sent and received in 16-17. Yeah, pages 2 and 3 just show the subject property there. So again, at page 3, you have the Tim Hortons there. It does not have a drive-through. I have inspected the subject property. So we really have the Tim's. There's another eye care and restaurant. I think it's Papa Murphy's Pizza on the other pad site just fronting Dakota. There's also in the last pad site, there's restaurant and MPI there, and then lots of small tenancies in and along that. It's too big to be a strip mall with too many pad sites, but think of it as just a really big strip mall. The larger format retail is on a separate roll number with Pier 1 and Shoppers and stuff. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with the subject, but Anyways, moving over to page 6, I think. Actually, Mr. Story and I aren't too far apart, I don't believe, on most parts here, but
We're
I'll
very
just,
close.
yeah, I'll just go through it quickly. That the rent's all model driven there, same standard parameters for neighborhood shopping, $8 shortfall, vacancy 4%. And we're using a cap rate at 7.15%, which is 20th percentile on the cap rate page 9. Again, right across from St. Patel Center, we have the income and expense questionnaire there at the back. Yep, that's really about it. Questions?
I thank you. Mr. Story,
No, no questions, thank you.
Ms. Nesbit,
No,
Mr. McIntyre.
I have no questions.
Mr. Story, your floor is yours.
Okay, we'll go very quickly, gentlemen and ladies. Page 3 of the brief, 84,000 square feet. We've calculated a fee simple rate for these type of projects by looking at a series of renewals, current leases that are renewing, and they're renewing in the $20.50 range. I'll show you them in a moment. 4% we're accepting the city's vacancy, and the cap rate of is based primarily on age. It's built in '86, I believe. It's an older property. It has awnings, closed shelter that's somewhat dated. Again, even though Tim Hortons doesn't have a drive-through, so I'm suggesting 7.5%, which is consistent, I think, with the way the city has been treating cap rate on retail of this cycle. And I would ask that the city, or pardon me, our value be considered at 20,066,000. Go to the next page, you'll see the properties and some overviews. If you go to page 7 of our brief, these are our current lease renewals. Now, Mike did mention, he knows about it, but the 4 largest tenants on this site, it takes up a city block, are on the same rent roll but have a different assessment roll. And 2 of them are Shoppers in Pier 1, the other is Metro Liquor Commission. So we took the most current renewals.
Remember the liquor commission's on this one, Sid.
What's that?
Liquor commission's on this one. The
Oh,
other
so-
one, the large
oh,
one,
so it wasn't
retails.
renewed.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
Mark's Work Warehouse, the Pier 1, and the Shoppers.
Sorry, thank you, Mike. Okay, so that what it is, these are renewals or starts that are current, and they're 15, 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, and they average up to 2027 average and a mean of 2006. We used a median of 2050, that's the median. And what we're looking at is, if you look at that of the site, these renewals and new leases make up about 48%. So we think the 2050 is a kind of a fee simple, reasonable request for the market rent. And the 7.3 was for the 7.5 for the cap rate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor,
Well, thanks.
Ms. Nesbit,
no questions.
Mr. McIntyre.
I have no questions.
Summation, either party? Okay. 1795 Henderson Highway. Mr. Taylor,
Sure. So the file number is 19-4891. Roll number 0400220100. 1795 Henderson Highway, the proposed 2020 reassessment value is $13,772,000. Really, it's just the one regional mall here, no, not regional mall, one community shopping center. That's what we were talking about before. We used as effective year built for 1999 based on the amount of work that's been gone back into this shopping center, but actually built physically back in 1979. Leasable area today is 65,194. So this one, as we kind of talked about before, this is one of the few remaining community shopping centers where they have that central corridor with the higher cam costs and stuff like that. Page 2 shows they sent in income and expense information. Also lots of the leases here, much like when we were looking at Northgate and some of the other ones, are older leases, renewals, again, just including those. Page 3 just has rental comparables for the subject property. So some larger format retail, along with smaller CRUs. Again, it's somewhat unique now because it's renovated and looks nice and new, and they've done work to like the roof and everything to give it that new effective age. But it's a nice new old formatted retail like community shopping center. So anyways, we're classifying this today as a neighborhood shopping center. So you see the mile driven rents there on page 4. The vacancy of 4% again, shortfall at $8, and capitalization rate at 7.3%. To get to that $13 million value. Fully inspected the subject property. Actually went to the Subway there last night. Supper.
You're
Yeah.
biased.
So, very familiar with the subject property. There, as Sid's talked about earlier today, the marketplace isn't there, there's no frills in there. The photographs, I would suggest on page 8, aren't reflective of the current condition physically anyways. They're like the new facade's all redone and the no frills is in there instead, so they have their big yellow banners everywhere and their shopping cart sections and stuff like that, so. Redevelopments, we're not seeing a significant redevelopment like we saw with Northgate, but shining new here too. So, anyways, that's my presentation on the Carver Mall. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Story, questions?
Just, yes, please. Mike, just on your familiarity with the shopping center, are you aware that it was closed for a year? When they
Like the
did
marketplace?
Yes, no, since Marketplace left through the redevelopment period?
Yeah, they closed, well, the marketplace left and they closed the central corridor. I'm not sure if it was for exactly a year.
Yeah.
The Rex all stayed open though.
Okay. Oh, yeah, oh, of course, yeah, but I didn't say that the mall was closed. No, that
They had to
there was
close
nobody
down
in
the
that
central
tenant
corridor
space
to,
for a year.
Well, there's still, again, there's still some tenancies that had access to the front, that you didn't have to go through the back.
Yeah.
So some tenancies were open while they redid all the inside, you know, the flooring and
Mhm.
painting and everything, so. It wasn't like the whole thing sat empty for a year.
Not the whole mall, but what had been the Marketplace space was essentially vacant for a year. Is that your understanding or no?
Yeah, but when I looked at the market space lease, I'm not sure exactly when they stopped receiving money on the marketplace, cause it
July
would have been.
31, 2018, it's in your
Yeah.
brief. It's
So it
they
was-
let the lease expire.
Yeah, so around that same time, the marketplace withdrew from Winnipeg, they left their store in St. Norbert.
Yes.
So they're just more of a small town grocer now.
Right.
But yeah, so their lease was still in place as the effective date, really. And then after that happened, that's when it sat vacant for a bit and it only just reopened a month ago as no frills.
Thank you.
Ms. Nesbit?
I guess that's all I.
Okay, Ms. Nesbit.
I have no questions.
Mr. McIntyre?
And I have no questions.
Mr. Story, the floor is yours.
Okay, I was gonna hand this out, but I'll just read it. Don't get anybody, Mike's confirmed it. The marketplace closed. I'll hand it out at the end, or after the presentation. I wanted to get the relevant dates, because it's kind of interesting. The vacancy doesn't show up on the, because of the timing of the reference date when circumstances happen. However, that being the case, we show in our brief and then the city's brief, we show that the lease was, the marketplace lease expired on the 31st of July 2018. They were in the premises right through to the expiry date. They left on good terms, and actually it didn't work for them. They turned down an extension. They were paying $8.50 a square foot. They turned that down. They weren't interested in staying on any circumstances. In September of 2017, and the only reason I'm throwing in these dates is it gets you, we can work it around the reference date a little bit differently. The landlord agents were engaged to approach Giant Tiger and Loblaws about looking at the space. And in October of 2017, they brought back an offer from Loblaws No Frills to lease it. Got a newspaper article here dated May 24th of 2018. Now we're past the reference date, but they were notified they were leaving well before the reference date. And just for information, the new lease with No Frills, 20,000 square feet at $14 per square foot, with a $45 per square foot landlord inducement. That's $900,000. And coincidentally, like Save-On, Loblaws ended up paying $14 a square foot for their face rent. But they too got an inducement. And the indications from the people that I spoke to, which is property manager and one of the Loblaws executives, was that Loblaws, when they're negotiating these, they request, almost typically in their leases, they look for inducements so they can refurb and rehash their stores. So the reason I say that is they actually went a period of time, almost a year, because they just opened a few months ago, where they were completely closed, and as a result, we're asking for a slight, maybe 2% increase in the cap rate, or in the, in the vacancy. Just trying to find my paper. Where'd that go? There it is. So we're asking for a 6% vacancy. The reason being that there was that movement in the marketplace. We're accepting we're not asking a change in the market rent. We're accepting the $16.73. It was, for all intents and purposes, and hopefully will continue to be a very successful mall. The tenant, with very little tenant turnover. I've monitored it for many years, and it's an interesting situation that got caught up with the competitive nature of the food business, I guess. But it was important that this was part of today's hearing, I think, because it does show that how the challenges of getting tenants for these developers. It's not easy. So I'm asking for an assessment of $12,387,000 as opposed to $13,770 from Mike. I'm accepting the market rents. I'm requesting a 2% increase in vacancy because it's real. It happened. 2% is not inappropriate. Vacancy loss is actually estimated turnover and vacancy through the estimated useful life of a building, and not forever and ever, but at different points in time. This is just one of those points in time. So with that, I will say thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Story. Mr. Taylor, questions of the applicant?
Two quick ones. So you're saying Loblaws manages the no frills, but I know this is a personal interest question, because it's all post reference. But you said Loblaws manages the no frills at this location, but the rest of the no frills are all like franchise owners. They're smaller grocery stores, so it's like, I want to own a grocery store, so I'm gonna franchise this. So is that the case with this one, or is it?
I don't think they're franchises. I think they're more like dealers. They're representing the brand, and they pay, and they have to buy the product. I don't know the details. I know I can tell you that I've done some no frills in Calgary where they've gone in and just taken, it's called 6 white walls. They just take shelf space and they just put boxes with food in it, and it seems to work. Here, so that's not what one would expect if they ask for huge inducements, but they did. So, not huge, but I guess.
My question was just about the management thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
The other question was just about your page 16, so you took a recommendation on the property last cycle.
Yes.
And you're looking for a lower value, albeit marginally, just due to
Well, only because they
post-reference,
lost a tenant and they had a huge financial hit
but
because of
just
that.
let me finish the question.
Yeah.
So your reduction's based on a post-reference vacancy?
No, just that the building is susceptible to history. Not specific laws, but it was an example that we have to have enough, when you go into retail, we have to have enough allowance there for the inevitability that you'll have vacancy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I thank you. Ms. Nesbitt,
I have no questions.
Mr. McIntyre,
And I have.
information needed, party? Let's go to the last one, which is Narren Avenue, 283.
We saved the best for last.
Uh-oh.
Mr. Taylor, the floor is yours.
Okay, so roll number is 14100122410, file number being 193929. Sid, I'm just gonna go on the fly on this one.
You know what, can I tell you something? I share, it's very confusing
Oh,
in terms of, it's an older building, and I think that somebody tried to assign square footage to it, and they're just tenants and they pay some rent. Are you having trouble with the square footage as well?
No, I'm just gonna make a recommendation today. My recommendation would be to reduce it to 936,000. So essentially all that is, because all we're looking at here being different is cap, and you have your 5% allowance.
Correct.
So all I'm using is your 8% cap, but scrapping the 5%. So it's 936 is my recommendation.
Mr. Story?
I know Mike let the 5% go by. I'll accept it.
All right. Any questions, panel members?
no.
No question.
Okay, I think that concludes our hearing. So, Mrs. Story, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you,
and,
Mr. Chair.
results,
Board member.
very soon. And Mr. Taylor, thank you for your presentation.